Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday. Today I'm running a day late because it was a public holiday yesterday. I'm going to carry on talking about what's on the screen, automation versus improvement. Actually, no, I'm just going to focus on process improvement today. Last week I talked with Callum about when would you automate, and as part of that conversation I introduced the concept that if you've got a high frequency, high complexity process, the top right hand corner of this picture, that you should probably be thinking about how do you optimize that. Either reduce the complexity so that you can move it into the automation space, or reduce the frequency so that you can afford to have people do the work by hand. Today I'm going to talk about some of the techniques that I prefer to use to move things from the high frequency, high complexity space into those two spaces. And the first principle or practice that I think is most applicable is the old Pareto principle. So the 80-20 rule by another name, the recognition that 80% of the value usually comes from 20% of the effort, which means that when you're looking at a high frequency, highly complex process, you'll probably find that the majority of the complexity that's in that process is there to serve the exceptions rather than serving the 80%. So you'll usually find that you've got a large amount of process that's just there for the just in case situation, as opposed to being there for the run of the mill situation. So my preferred way of dealing with that is to split them up. Take the stuff that's there for the mainstream, the 20% that's going to satisfy 80% of your customer needs, and separate that out and start looking to automate it, and then leave behind all of the nasty exceptions, the things that require specialized knowledge, the things that require that you've been doing what you've been doing for a decade or more. But because they're only required for 20% of the customers, and sometimes they're only required for 1% of your customers, you can make them much more specialized, and you've moved them into that bottom right-hand corner, so that you don't have to worry about doing it 100 times a month or looking for those exceptions 100 times a month. You know that they're going to happen once or twice a month. And when they happen, you give them to your highly skilled specialist who knows how to deal with those problems. So that's the core way that I prefer to deal with that complexity. The second option is I'm kind of taking a step back from the overall process and ask the question, do I really need that complexity? So if you built something into your process to deal with the 1% customer that needs you to be incredibly specialized for them and do something really complex, sometimes it's best to stop and ask the question, do I really need to be doing that at all? Does it serve where I'm going to as a business? And often the answer to that is no. So you can literally just delete that special process to deal with that exception and stop doing it. And when the customer says, how come you won't do all of the stuff for me anymore, you simply say, we've decided that we're not going to provide that service anymore. However, if you stay within the lines, operate or deal with our services the way that we want to, then we'll be more than happy to continue to look after you. And that, of course, will mean that you've moved back towards the automation space, reduced the complexity, and made it easier to manage those customers. Lastly, to finish off for this week, I wanted to talk about where do I think business owners should be sitting. So not just what does the organisation need to do, but where do business owners need to operate. And if we've successfully gotten rid of the stuff that's in the outside edge of that optimised box, that means as a business owner, you should be able to operate in this green area where you've got not the most complexity, you've got some, and you've got moderate frequency. So, like I said, hopefully what you've managed to do is that the stuff that's further out in the optimized box you've gotten rid of, and anything that's further out in the outsourced box, that's where you should be hiring somebody who's highly specialized, not necessarily inside your organization. You can outsource to a specialist like an accountant, or either hiring somebody or outsourcing to somebody who's highly specialized who can look after that low frequency, high complexity process. And back on the left-hand side in the automate space, just as we talked about with Callum last week, you should be looking to apply technology so that you don't have anybody doing too much of the work. You have the technology doing the majority of the work. So that's where I think as a business owner, you should be operating from a process perspective, looking to get rid of the high volume, high complexity, outsource the low volume, high complexity, and automate the high volume, low complexity. That's all from me for this week. I will catch up with everybody next Monday, back when it's not a public holiday again.